Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare.
All right, well, welcome once again. Good to see all of you, those of you physically present and all of you online. Such a joy to be here on this Wednesday. We got a little snow coming up here in Carbondale, Colorado. Hopefully you're warm and safe wherever you are. So we are in this text, we're wrapping up the stage of the text around the importance of compassion, how to engage with compassion in a way that you can bring it into all of your activities and your interactions with others. Last week, I think we had a pretty good discussion around how we can even work with people that we find very challenging, and how with compassion we can actually be much more skillful about how we engage with them in ways that are more beneficial, not just for them, but for ourselves as well. And I think that's where we're picking up the text. I'm going to pop it up here. So one of the really, I think, thoughtful processes, certainly in Tibetan Buddhism, is that you don't just do something. It's kind of like, okay, what's the benefits of doing this? How is this helpful, or how is it detrimental if you don't do that? So there's always this process of bringing that to mind. And so we've already had a lot of discussion about the ups and downs with that. And we're picking up the text here at the end that says, the tremendous benefits of altruism are evident in both our daily lives and our spiritual lives. When we cultivate an altruistic attitude towards colleagues, family members, or even people whose actions are repugnant to us, immediately fear, insecurity, and anxiety decrease. This occurs because underneath fear and insecurity is a suspicious attitude that looks at others as a threat. When we view others as being truly like ourselves, as living beings who naturally aspire for happiness and wish to overcome suffering, and on that basis develop concern for them, it has the immediate effect of releasing us from the grip of tension, mistrust, and jealousy. Here it is evident that right away altruism creates ease and joy within us. We can mentally relax, sleep more deeply, and the taste of our food even improves. Okay, I'm signing up for that right there. Can Brussels sprouts get any better? I would like to investigate that. Now I'm on the dark chocolate. Okay, focus, John. In a sense, as a byproduct of cultivating an altruistic attitude and engaging in altruistic action, our own interests are served. Everything from temporary happiness to the long-term joy of full awakening. All of these are a function and result of altruism. If we think and act with compassion now, eventually, as Buddhas, we will be able to benefit all other sentient beings in the most effective way possible. Although the wisdom realizing emptiness is very important on the path, it is bodhicitta, this great compassion, that makes this realization a cause for us to attain the fully awakened mind of a Buddha. Without great compassion and bodhicitta, the wisdom realizing emptiness alone cannot bring Buddhahood. So we'll just pause there for a moment. His Holiness will often say that being compassionate is being wisely selfish. That we're ultimately going to benefit. And the irony is, if I do it for that reason, it's probably not going to work so well. So understanding, though, where we are leaving off is, if I recognize, as we talked about, that everything I have in my life is because of others. Everything. Words I use, the computer I'm using, the Brussels sprouts I had for lunch, clothes I wear, everything I know is because of all these others that I've never even met. I don't know who built those roads. I don't know who built this building. I don't know who built the school that I was taught in. I don't know the parents and grandparents of my teachers. I don't know any of these people that have given me a life. And everything I have in my life is because of all these others who are a lot like me, trying to find happiness, trying to avoid suffering. They have their own mental afflictions that get in their way, just like I do. And so on that basis, if I recognize that people are struggling in their own ways, just like I am, well, then, there's nothing to take personally. That's where we left off, I don't need to take it personally that they're doing something to me, unless they're hitting you with a baseball bat, in which case, that's very personal. And you would like to stop that. But generally, the attitudes and the thoughts, we recognize that people are, they're not yelling in anger because they're happy. They're not doing these activities that are creating harm in their lives. So then, compassion is for one purpose: to remove suffering of yourself, suffering of others. And so understanding this, then we can recognize that rather than thinking a person's just a jerk, that they're struggling. It's a common analogy is if I see someone in a wheelchair, yeah, I got compassion for them. But, somebody who's healthy, who's, just doing something jerky, I got no compassion for them. But the person in a wheelchair might be pretty happy, living a meaningful life, and this person's clearly struggling. And so the illness of ignorance and confusion and affliction, recognizing as that illness, well, then it's a lot easier to interact with them and not take something personally. And then I'm going to, not have the anger, the resentment, the frustration, the fear, or what was touched on here underneath all this, some insecurity from my own side. And as you've heard me say many times, I've got enough issues in my own life that I do not need to defend my insecurity. I don't need to stick up for my insecurities, my fears, my resentments from someone. I don't need to defend them. They're strong enough. They don't need me to stick up for my own insecurity and take something personally. But we tend to, don't we? But what if we were actually knew that we're okay, that I'm valuable, I'm worthy, I'm fine? How much are your words going to be an issue? But if I understand that your words are coming, if you're saying something harmful, from your own afflictive states, and I'm okay, then wow, what a different space to interact with someone, and then reap these benefits. The afflictive states of self-grasping, of being so self-important, being the core root problem. It's weird that I would think that other person's my problem. But, pretty easy to do that. Only they would change. My life would be so much better. And yet I can be in my own room by myself and be frustrated. It's an interesting misunderstanding. So here's the benefits, this peace of mind, these qualities, the way we engage with others, the absence of a need to, really grasp on and reify someone and the label that I'm putting on them. And a lot more understanding about just the nature. I mean, me personally, I don't think I've met many people who have done harmful things that aren't things I haven't already done. I mean, you guys may not have that experience, but I have a past that's not too pretty. And I've done a lot of harmful things. And I've also done a lot of kind things. And the person I am becoming today came from a person that was someone who created a lot of pain previously in their lives. And just like me, others are trying to find their way. So this idea of understanding that underneath these afflictive states that people are, creating suffering in their own lives by their own grasping and resentments and frustrations, greed and anger, they're really creating a lot of struggle and suffering. And underneath that, they have the same qualities of Buddha nature as I have, no less, no more. They just haven't been as fortunate as maybe we have to receive some kindness in ways that have helped us overcome some of our afflictions. So no need to be better than anyone, but maybe recognize we've been more fortunate than some people who haven't received some of the kindness that we have in our lives. And there we have a lot of room for compassion. And an immediate, benefit, as His Holiness was pointing out in this text. A lot of benefit there. So just pause there and see if anyone had any thoughts or questions regarding this as we're nearing the end of the compassion piece. All right, we're all pretty good. If something pops up at any point, feel free to unmute and take a look. We're just going to summarize the points here in the text. So I'll pop that right here. So they have nice little sort of key points to just remind us what we've been going through here. Number one, the altruistic intention of bodhicitta encompasses all sentient beings. Okay, so it's not, I have compassion for Jimmy and Susie and, so-and-so, but, not that other group of people or that person. It's really expanding our capacity to extend to all beings. Now, having said that, just because you and I sit there and decide to do that, not necessarily going to be capable of doing that tomorrow. It's something that we work with, that we grow, that we constantly work at expanding. And so one of the really valuable teachings on, we have this idea of people we like, people we don't like, and then a whole lot of neutral people. And one of the teachers said, the people that we are real neutral about, that's the worst one. Having indifference towards people. Having strong feelings against someone gives you something to work with. People we like, we have a lot of attachment, something to work with. That whole indifference towards whoever and not caring, that's really a place that we can struggle in a way that's profound. So we're also generally harder on the people we love sometimes than someone we don't know very well, right? A lot stronger feelings with that partner in your relationship or the kid that you're trying to raise or, what's going on. And then the people that we obviously struggle with, that we don't like. A lot of more clarity around, what we have to work with. So the opportunity here is to start equalizing this. The first piece is equanimity. Starting to recognize that these others are just like me in their struggles and their frustrations and their confusion and their grasping. They're just like me in how they're seeking happiness, just like me, how they want to avoid suffering, just like me in their confusion. And so there's a process of doing this over time in which we can start to actually open your heart up to that. But it's not a intellectual thing, and it's not, I'm just going to go treat Jimmy at the whatever shop, this way. It's really starting to observe and be with and understand the struggles of yourself so you can understand the struggles of others, and then start to really open your eyes to what those struggles are about. See if we can avoid I'm the greatest dad, or my kid's the honor roll student, or best grandkid ever. Everybody's somebody's grandkid, right? I mean, it's good to have, joy for our grandchildren. I'm about to go see mine this weekend. And what a joy. But can I also have the same capacity to love someone who's not my grandchild with the same value that I do my grandchild? That's where we want to get to. And recognize that everybody's somebody's grandchild. And everybody's somebody's grandparent. And how about we all become the best grandparents ever? That wouldn't quite work, would it? But how about we all work at being good grandparents to each other? So this is something we work with, and it's gradual and it takes time. But the benefits are beyond, beyond really anything we can truly know till we get there. I'm much better at it than I used to be. I still got my biases and stuff, but man, I'm so much better with human beings that, when I feel a tension in my body, the difference today is I start understanding there's a lot of me in this, and it gives me a lot more room. But I'll tell you, there's some days I do not want to go spend time with certain people. That's just true. And then the opportunity to be with those people, even when you didn't want to, and what's that like? What's really helped me is, being in a recovery myself. There's a process where people share, they write down what's called a 4-step, and they write down, really some of the worst things they've ever done in their life. They write down their fears and their insecurities and things they've never shared with another human being. And then they pick one person they share this with. And when you hear somebody else's secrets and their struggles and their shame, I've never sat through one of those and didn't have a great deal of compassion and care for that human being. And they've shared some pretty, horrific things sometimes. We're always seeing the outside of someone. And it's pretty rare to know their fears, their insecurities, their struggles. So that's something that, helps me. I can always remember I don't know their struggles. And we deal with their actions, right? It doesn't make their actions okay. We covered that last week. Matter of fact, with compassion, I can better hold people accountable in ways that are healthy, addressing the behavior while still recognizing the value underneath that behavior. All right. Looked like somebody popped up a chat. So, hearing the phrase you made, perhaps some haven't seen the kindness that some of us have. I was thinking receive the kindness. What is the path of working along the roots of trauma stemming from our early cognitive childhood, scholastic, and familial trauma? So, coming back to our own traumas, the struggles, the abuse that we've received, or difficult situations we've lived through. Number one, I think that, a good trauma therapist is always a good choice. But also to understand that, and every situation is different. But in general, that the traumas that we've endured, lived through, survived, are conditions for us to also grow. So when you seek through, like, even a good trauma therapist, the journey is going to be about how you built resiliency and how today the person you are is not that wounded individual you once were. And how do we walk through a healing process? And one of the more potent healing processes is forgiveness. It's going to be hard for me to heal my trauma fully until I also understand that the situations that came about also came about because of other people's confusions and difficulties, and often their own traumas. And understanding and forgiving them does not forgive what they did, not the behavior, but the recognition of their own struggles. I sit in a lot of groups, and I was in a men's group of men in recovery, and it was about fathers, and all these men, are in recovery. They've had time, but everyone in my group, with the exception of me, I think, had a father that was abusive, and they'd lived through some pretty horrific things. And some of the men had shared things like when they discovered what their father had to come through, and what, the difficulties of the generational trauma and the difficulties. And some of them were able to. There was one man who, this father was so abusive, like he didn't talk. This guy went to prison. This guy, was a tough guy. He went through prison. He went through a lot of violence. He, to survive, and he had survived horrific stuff, early childhood, and his father and all that. Had never had a relationship with his father. He made it through prison, made it through all that violence, found recovery, and and was raising his own family and trying to learn how to be a dad. And part of that healing is he wanted to find a way to be okay with his dad. And he wound up in the later years actually changing his dad's diapers and letting him know that he loved him and taking care of him in his last few years. And the healing that this man had, the love that he had, his ability to be of service to others was something that was beyond, inspirational. And so there's great capacity there if we can make some inroads, but there's small steps. I mean, what I'm sharing, that was tremendous, it kind of just floored me. But the point here is understanding that all of this trauma, all the harm that others do to us, all the harm we do to others, is always coming from this, self-cherishing, self-centered, grasping at seeking something to be okay, some way of being okay. That's afflicted, that's delusional, that is not cultivating the well-being, the happiness that one is seeking. And it's out of that misperception that people do great harm. And so part of that healing process, number one, is to recognize that your own resiliency, that you have survived this, that you have strength. What have you learned and how have you grown? And then in recognizing that capacity, then you can recognize others have their struggles. From a Buddhist perspective, which is where we're going next in mind training, there's even a point where you recognize the incredible growth that you've received out of that whole process, and that that's actually been very beneficial to your path of understanding and awakening. So mind training is going to recognize that the adversity in our life has also been the push to become who we are, and to value that. That's a few thoughts on that. It's not an easy thing, but I've told many stories about forgiveness and people that have come through this. The woman who had her daughter killed and went to forgive the murderer, and those stories of people I've met in my own lives. And I just think about my own journey about that, as well as the ultimate message is that when we forgive someone, what we're really doing is giving ourselves permission to stop suffering. I don't need to carry that wound anymore. They don't magically get better because I forgave them, but I get better because I don't need to carry that wound anymore. I give it permission to heal. So there's a good piece there for our trauma. And again, we're not forgiving the action. So still, second sentence of point one summary. Generating this bodhicitta uplifts our hearts and gives meaning to our lives. It's funny, I'm sorry, I forget to stop hitting that stop share. Had a conversation with a visitor here today, and had a conversational bit about life. And one of the conversations that prompted me to engage in this path, talking about bodhicitta bringing meaning to your lives, was a teacher, a monk, who came into town. I was still very much a lay person and just checking this out. And it was his talk on bodhicitta, stating that literally everything that you do, you could have that thought about, may this be helpful. And about everything. He was even talking about going to the bathroom. He was talking about everything you do and how you eat. And it was so moving to me, you could see this is how he lived. I mean, he was the first man I ever let hold my hand, just saying. And I was like, yeah, I'll let you hold my hand. I mean, it was so sweet. Because I was a tough guy back then. And he's holding my hand, and I was like, this is awkward, but it's good, like he was just so much love. And I let him hold my hand, walk me around the bed. And it was this person talking about compassion that had me begin my journey to engage in this path so deeply. So talking about compassion being uplifting and inspiring, and somebody else's inspired me to wind up, going and volunteering at my Dharma center and let a man hold my hand. I'm a hugger now. That was a little awkward back then. Number two, generating bodhicitta begins with wanting to free ourselves from the three kinds of dukkha, or unsatisfactory conditions. So yeah, that's great that they put an unsatisfactory condition instead of just the word suffering, right? The dukkha of pain, the dukkha of change, and the pervasive dukkha of conditioning. So this is where it begins, is if, to recap, is understanding our own types of suffering and our desire to be free of that suffering. Then we get the capacity to bring it to others. So if we recognize compassion is the desire to remove suffering, basically that's the whole Buddhist path, right? How to remove suffering. So compassion's core to the whole journey. What are methods to remove suffering? And these three types: suffering of change, and then that pervasive conditioning. Like us, other sentient beings are afflicted by the three types of dukkha, like us, they want to be happy, avoid misery. In addition, they've been and will continue to be kind to us. So even our biggest jerks are helping support us. You know, I always say that annoying customer is the reason you got a job, or that person who's doing this other thing might have been the one who built the roads you're on, or delivered the groceries to the store, the big trucks on the road, or all these people are supporting our lives and are offering us these conditions. And so generating this compassion, wishing them to be free of their suffering, their dukkha. And then the fourth, based on this compassion, generate the altruistic intention to become fully awakened so you can bring this about. So those are the steps, right? And it starts with our own suffering, the realization that others have struggled just like I have, and that these others are responsible for the life that you have. And then we want to do something about it. And that's the motivation to engage in cultivating these potentials in yourself so you can be of highest benefit to all. So just pause there. Might dabble a little bit in the mind training, but want to see if anyone had any thoughts or questions or comments that may have come up. Rita.
What if you just need reassurance? What if you are in confusion and you feel like you may have harmed someone a little bit or upset someone, or you feel like you're having some feelings of insecurity that someone doesn't like you? I mean, do we just grapple with all this inside, or when is it appropriate to ask for, clarity and or reassurance, and what's the most skillful way to do that?
I think it's always appropriate. Jetsuma Tenzo Palmo is very, very clear that in order to engage in this path, we need to cultivate our own qualities of security, self-worth, value, and that's surrounding ourselves with supportive people. That is engaging and allowing yourself to be helped by others. So a self-compassion activity, if you need some reassurance, is reaching out to a safe and a friend. It's leaning in for support. So, and if you might feel like you'd harmed or done something, very appropriate to inquire. If I've done something, and how can I make up for it? That compassion is about removing the suffering. Everything that you're identifying are ways of suffering, right? So taking those steps is appropriate because we're humans in human form and living in this world that we're in. We support each other. And there's some people, so for example, who should not be in our lives right now. Okay. I can have compassion for them, but I'm not going to let the serial killer be a roommate with me. Okay. There's some unhealthy relationships that are not good for us right now in our lives. And so this does not preclude really. Compassion is about wisdom and about, what's the healthiest situation here for us. And it might mean I need a little help. It might mean I need a little more clarity. It might be I need to step away from something. But always with the motivation of trying to do something to be beneficial for the situation. Is that addressing your question somewhat?
Yes, it helps a lot. It just is hard for me to figure out how to, because I don't have a lot of opportunity to interact with people very much, but how to, and it's always been like, how do I ask for, ask for clarity or something without sounding like a whiner, without feeling like I'm just being needy. When I sort of know this is my issue, and I can think about all the just like me and all the other people are dealing with stuff too, but I just want a little help, and I just feel needy. So
Yeah. Well, let me say, how about you start with saying, hey, I'm a little needy right now. And,
okay.
I would like to have some help. Like, see, that's where, again, self-grasping is I shouldn't be needy. Self-grasping is I shouldn't feel insecure. Self-grasping is, this is my stuff. That's another part of our, egoic mind, and it's unhealthy. And instead of saying, some days I'm going to be needy, some days I'm going to be insecure, some days I'm going to, of course, we all need people to lean on. Why wouldn't I be needy sometime? I bet I could ask everybody on this teaching, whether online or here, have you ever felt needy? And everybody's going, yeah, we've all been needy. So it's okay to be needy. What's not okay is to think I shouldn't be needy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really a helpful reminder. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I appreciate what you always say in the recovery guidance every day. If you need help, reach out to someone, and I I just don't really know how to do that very well.
Yeah, you don't have to do it well, just do it.
Okay, great, thanks.
I still want to break out in the song. We all need somebody to lean on. You just might have a problem. Yeah, come on, that's a theme song. Yeah. So
right, thanks, John.
You're welcome. We need to begin where we are, not where we're not. And that's one of the biggest obstacles in the path is I think I should be somewhere else. And I compare how I'm feeling on any given day with who I think I should be, instead of where I am today with how far I've come, which is more accurate. Look at where I am today and how far I've come. And I'm going to lose that other division, comparing myself to who I think I ought to be. That's I haven't ever lived up to that one. But I've gradually gotten better through my ups and downs. So yeah, we begin where we are, and Jetsuman Tenzabon is very good about that. It's just work on getting our needs met so that we can. But her saying is, you really need a strong, healthy, good sense of self. We need to nurture that so that we can eliminate that self. Now, you're not going to do very well if I'm insecure. It's very difficult to let go of that grasping. Coming up on the hour, is there any other thoughts? This is a good, I don't want to start the mind training piece.
Yeah, I have a share.
Oh, good.
I found that, that I can easily, well, not easily, but I have more capacity to have compassion for others. But when it comes to myself, it's like, forget it.
Yeah, please. Yeah, it's all muted. Sorry. So it's easier to have compassion for others, but not so much for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a common tendency in our culture.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It sparks one of the more famous conversations between the sort of Eastern mind and a Western mind. Originally, it was a big famous conversation the Dalai Lama had with a whole bunch of spiritual leaders and neuroscientists and all that at one of those early talks, because they're teaching us loving kindness, how we can have loving kindness. It starts with me, may I be loved, and they're in this saying it's difficult to do that. The Dalai Lama's like, what? That can't be right. Like, he was like, you think very rare. He said, I think it's very rare. And because they don't really have a word for that kind of guilt or shame in Tibetan. And, so there's this whole dialogue. Alan Wallace was a translator, and he was trying to get the words, and, dialogue is like, it doesn't seem to make sense. And then, the Tibetan monks, he was like, you guys feel like that? And they're like, not really. And then all these like great scientists, great minds, great spiritual, what about you? Like all their hands went up, like we all struggle with this. And, from the sort of dialogue or conversation, the difference, I think, was this sense of in those cultures, you have Buddha nature, like you're taught you have Buddha nature. You're taught, and this human stuff, that's not really who you are. That's just the stuff you need to work with. And so they don't cling to it. They don't really have a word for that so much. Whereas, we come in and, it's pull yourself up by your bootstrap, it's, this hard grinding, what have I accomplished? What have I done? And so culturally, we have a lot of that being hard on ourselves built in. So they've actually had to tailor the teachings differently. A lot of people teach loving kindness now starting with others first, because then finally you can get to yourself. And also find in recovery circles, it kind of works that way. Being of service to others gives me some self-worth, right? Yeah. And so I think it's a fallacy when people say you can't love someone until you love yourself. I can love people a lot and not love myself very much. Once I love myself, I think I could do it better. But self-compassion often starts with being of service, doing some things, right? What's the idea is if I want to feel worthy, I do worthy things, right? And, so a lot of times you can work it in the other order to get a sense of that. And then my other take on that is I would challenge your questioning that you're not very good at self-compassion by reframing it. I bet you're really good at being self-compassionate. What are the things you do each and every day that prevent suffering in your life? Do you brush your teeth? That prevents suffering, right? Compassionate activity. Do you take some walks out in nature or something? Oh, compassionate activity. Make your bed, do things like that. I mean, when you start looking at the list of things that you do in your life that actually allow you to avoid suffering, think about all the self-compassion activities you do in a day.
Yeah.
And what if I start recognizing I do a lot of self-compassion activities? What I'm not very good at is I have a critical opinion of myself sometimes. Oh, okay. Well, maybe I can work on that. And maybe some of that is developing my self-compassion towards that, because I do have the capacity for self-compassion. I do it all the time. So maybe we're better at it than we think. We just don't recognize how many good things we do for ourselves that reduce suffering in our lives. And that maybe I can direct that a little bit about that critic, Yeah, but I find coming from a place of empowerment that way is helpful for me. It's not, I'm not very good at self-compassion. It's sometimes I'm not, especially with certain things. Other times I'm very good at it. And, then I'm not saying I'm not good at self-compassion. Sometimes I'm not. Other times I am. Get some agency there, right? Some power. Because it's just more true. Yeah, because then, the other thing I say all the time is we have thinking errors. One of them is, I always make that same mistake. Ever said that? I mean, I've said that. I always make that mistake. There I am, make that mistake again. And I go, well, do you always make that same mistake? What about all the times you're not making that mistake? Which, by the way, is most of your life. So most of my life, I'm not making that mistake. Then I make the mistake, and then my mind says, I always make it, right? And so that, they call it cognitive distortions, but is challenging that. No, yeah, I'm making that mistake again. That's accurate. But most of the time, I'm not. Yeah, most of the time, I'm not. Yeah, so a lot of times I am self-compassionate. Sometimes I'm not. Both, just broadens that in a perspective. All right, well, let's just take a moment now to recognize the kindness that we've all, and the care that we've brought to ourselves in these teachings, and the opportunity to dedicate the merit of our time and energy together for the benefit of all others and for our own continued spiritual development. And those of you who care to, you can join in dedication. By this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. All right, well, thank you all so much for all the good that you bring to the world. It's a joy to be able to continuously hang out with you on Wednesday nights. I'm changing my screen so I can now see all of you. All right. Wow, look at that crew. Yeah. All right. Thank you all so much. Thank you, those of you physically here and those of you online. Good to see your faces. Let's try to stay out of trouble and have some fun in there along the way. Okay.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, John. Bye,
Thanks, John.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
I feel like you should all be saying good night, John, or what was that? Good night, John boy. Yeah. All right. Take care.
Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha.